Hi, everybody. Welcome to Therate. My name is Katie, and I'm here with Ashleigh to provide you a therapist's perspective on Taylor's musical mental health themes. We're not therapy, but we do hope you enjoy our conversation. Ashleigh, today we're talking about I Can Do It With a Broken Heart. What made you pick this song to discuss today?
I am so excited to discuss this song. I chose it. It was like the first one that I was like, okay, we have to talk about this song. Some of the lines that made me think that were, I'm so depressed, I act like it's my birthday.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll just stick with that one because that says it all, right? So there's some relatability to that. I felt like that whole song is just like, I'm doing this, but I do not feel like it. And I feel like it's a beautiful picture for how resilient people with mental illnesses can be.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not a judgment on Taylor herself. I want to make that really clear. Like, I'm not saying she has a mental illness, but I do think it shows a lot of resilience. And I think it also is a common thing to feel when you are depressed or really anxious or feel your feelings a lot. It can be easy to be like, don't pay attention to me, leave me alone. Like, I'll put on a mask. Like, I will show you that I'm having the
Yes.
best time and you don't need to know about the vulnerable part of me. And sometimes that's fair. Sometimes we have to do that to survive. Other
Yeah.
times it's maybe not the healthiest. And so I thought it would be a really good conversation for us to have. And so the way that I'm kind of describing that feeling of like, I'm going to put a mask on, I'm not going to show you this vulnerability or the fact that I'm really having a hard time is emotional masking. And so that's kind of why I chose this song. I thought it would be a really good way to talk about mental illness and resilience and where that line can be.
Yeah. And Ashleigh, maybe for our listeners, could you define what the term emotional masking means?
Yeah, so I think it's when those hard days are happening and you're really feeling those feelings and you just pretend like they aren't there, right? Like there is not going to be any sign on your face that you are having a hard time. So sometimes we see this with like even online, people will post like this person, the photo will be somebody who's smiling really intensely, having appearing to have a great time, and then you'll find out that they like hurt themselves in some way later on that day, right? Like you just had
Hmm.
no idea.
Hmm.
So that's kind of how I'm using that term. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that that's totally an accurate definition of that term. I think I would add that emotional masking can go, I think, a layer deeper than just bad days, but it can be a way that you disconnect from like certain feelings that you are uncomfortable feeling. And so you just don't think about it. You shove it away, you put it in a little mental box in your mind, and like you just don't ever go there to the point where people might ask you how you're feeling or if you're doing okay, and you just say yes because like you're so disconnected from like those difficult feelings that you don't even know that they're there anymore. Like this is just your new
Yeah.
state of being. So masking can be a temporary behavior, or it could be deeply ingrained long-term behavior if you're remaining disconnected from those feelings. You may not even recognize that you are still emotionally masking at that point.
Yeah, that's a really good thing to add. Yeah, you avoid things so long that it just you're not even connected to that anymore. So I want to dive into some of the questions I would ask this person. So if this song were to come into my office and I was that song's therapist, this is where we would be going. Where is the line between resilience and pushing through too hard? How would it
Oh, I just like Ashleigh, that is bringing the fire. Okay, keep going. I just love that question.
Thank you. Well, it's hard because, yeah, there are times where it feels like I said, sometimes you have to survive, right? Sometimes you have a
Hmm.
job to do and you have to do your job so that you can pay for the food on your table. You
Hmm.
have to find a way to make it work in those
Hmm.
moments. There are
Hmm.
other moments where, like you said, like it's just easier not to engage with this emotion. So we're just going to keep going, right?
Hmm.
Like I can't be bothered with that stuff. So we're just going to pretend like it's not there.
Right.
So yeah, where is that line for that person? And how would it feel to be more authentic?
Mhm.
When will it be enough? When have you pushed yourself too hard?
Mm.
I love watching you react to these
They're
questions.
so good. They're so good. You're bringing fire.
And this is another one, and we kind of talked about this with Who's Afraid of Little Old Me too. Who are you proving yourself to?
Mm.
So those are the questions I'd be asking this person. How about you, Katie? What did you have?
Yeah. I was really gripped by the lyric, fake it till you make it. And I just want to ask, what was it like to be told to fake it till you make it?
Hmm.
Um, I would have also asked this question, when you talk about crying a lot and being so productive, it's an art. I think I would kind of ask like, at what point do your tears cause you to pause? Like, how much do you cry before you recognize that maybe I need to not be pushing through this anymore?
Yeah, those are really good.
And then I would also say that, um, what is it like to find his things in drawers? What's it like to find that crucial evidence that you didn't imagine the whole thing? I think that lyric really speaks to this idea of like, am I making this up? You
Yeah,
know, like I think sometimes when we feel intense sadness, we can just ask ourselves like, "Oh, is this all in my head? Am I just quote unquote being dramatic?"
yeah.
And then you find something that like kind of brings it all crashing back in, like, "Oh no, this is why." So what's it like in those moments when you find those things that actually remind you how severe the situation is as you're going through it?
Yeah, I love that one too because it's a good reminder that there can be like these moments of this reminds me of this and this reminds me of this. And like you're seeing these things all throughout, especially in breakups, I think that happens. But, in general too, like, or anytime you're grieving, it can be like,
Hmm.
okay, that person drank coffee, I'm drinking coffee. Like there can
Hmm.
be so many reminders of it.
Yeah.
Um,
So can you tell me, Ashley, what recommendations would you provide?
we'll probably find some themes in how you and I answer some of these questions. And I think one of mine is like, who are your people? Like
Hmm.
who is your support system through this? Because I can't imagine being that resilient without a community behind you. Um, So finding that support system and finding people you can safely be authentic with. So it's not always appropriate to show your emotions at their fullest amount in every situation, right? But like if there's a difference between your therapist and the person that you meet on the street one day, like how do you kind of decide what you're going to share with each person and still be authentic, but
Yes.
appropriate? If that makes sense.
Yes. 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 Oh, can I take a little side tangent here with you for a second?
Please do.
I think that what you're describing is a really important skill that I actually discuss a lot with my clients, because
I'm so
people
excited.
can often feel inauthentic if they're having a terrible day and someone asks them, "Well, how are you doing?" "Oh, I'm good." And they don't want to participate in like this casual answer that isn't honest. And yet they're also not going to say like, "Well, my partner just told me they're leaving me and I think I'm going to lose my job and my dog just died." Like you may not go into like this list of like your life traumas. Um, but what could it look like to give an authentic answer that's appropriate to somebody who's just doing a casual like polite question, but it's not really an invitation to like, how are you really doing? Like the lean, the the drawing out the really,
Hmm.
that kind of indicates that this is a more serious question. So yeah, any
Yeah.
thoughts to that?
Yes. I was just going to say, if I can take this even a little bit further, like also being willing to be that person for other people, right? Like be willing to
Hmm.
do that lean if the relationship is appropriate to do that. Like, if I were to see you, Katie, at the office, I feel like you and I
Hmm.
are at a place where I wouldn't just be like, hey, see ya. And I would be like, hey, how are you actually? Like this and this and this and this are
Hmm.
happening. Like
Yeah.
what's actually going on for you? Because it's not just about finding your people, like those people need people too. And so it can be transactional.
Yes.
Um, so anyway,
Yes.
yeah, that was a great thing to add. I'm
Yeah,
so glad that you said
absolutely.
that.
And it looked like you had more questions to ask or more recommendations. So what would be your next one?
I do. Yeah. Allowing your face to match your words and feelings. So
Oh.
I love doing this exercise with clients, where like if they are laughing through a really difficult experience, I will say, "Can you tell me that again?" But have your face and your tone match what you said. And it usually is like a lot more relatable. It's a more authentic experience because you're allowing those emotions
Mhm.
to come out instead of like still stuffing them and smiling through it. Um, and that's not to say you can't like tell a story that you're over and it was maybe hard, but it's funny now. Like sometimes that happens. But when you're in the middle of it, like find people you can be really authentic with. And then I would also say, she says, I've been holding my breath since he left.
Yes.
And I just want to say, breathe. It's
Mhm.
okay to breathe and find a
Mhm.
place where you can breathe. Yeah. What
Yeah.
recommendations did you have down, Katie?
Oh, those are so good. A lot of the same. One of my focuses in therapy is somatic release. And for those who maybe aren't familiar with that term, somatic just refers to like in the body, right? And so when we talk about somatic release, we're saying body release, like body processing. So, kind of contrary to what a lot of people might assume, processing your emotions isn't something that happens in the brain. It involves the full body's reaction. So when you talk about breathing, crying, shaking, rocking, punching, throwing, kicking, all of these things can be ways for emotions to come out of our body. And so my recommendation would be, what would it be like to process your emotions in a way that isn't a performance?
Ooh.
But is for yourself. So I think that for Taylor in particular, like, where does processing your emotions for you and your own internal work meet creating art that is for marketed consumption?
That is really, really good.
Where is that line? I wouldn't even begin to like say, but I think that for people like you and me who are not on big stages, um, and for our listeners, what could it look like for you to process your emotions in a really authentic way, in a way that is messy and uncomfortable, and that makes you feel uncomfortable to an extent? I mean, like, we can get really uncomfortable with our own tears, we can get uncomfortable with our own process. And so we want to keep that secretive, we want to judge it. Like, maybe I feel like screaming, but like that would make me look quote unquote immature or childish. And so then I don't release the emotion that I have because I don't feel like I've put a judgment on it in some way.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. And I also want to acknowledge that there are like appropriate times for these things too, right?
Yes.
Like if you go screaming on the street, there will be some odd looks. So I'm not saying don't do that. I'm saying be prepared for the consequences if you choose to do that.
Be informed. You might get a police called on you.
Perhaps screaming into a pillow in your room is maybe a better option.
Perhaps in your car, perhaps a private place with safe people.
Who will scream with you? Great.
For sure.
Whatever you
For
need to
sure.
do. Yeah, yeah. Any other recommendations you had?
That was the main one. I think the rest of them really echoed what you said, and you said it so well.
I love what you had to share too. That's great. What would you validate about this experience?
Ooh, it's a little bit of what you said before, so I won't belabor the point too much, but I do want to say that emotional masking is an important part of functioning. And so we're not here to say never do it or don't do it, or like if you do it, this is emotionally unhealthy. All things in moderation. So I think it's emotional masking is a short-term solution. And when we take short-term solutions and apply them to long-term situations, we're always going to end up in a bad place because we're using the wrong tool, the right tool in the wrong way.
That's so good, Katie. Keep going. I love it.
So I would just um, I would just say that be self-aware in some ways, and if you don't feel like you have the tools to be self-aware, like please seek out therapy or trusted people to help you in that situation. But kind of know, where am I kind of losing touch with who I am, with my authentic self? For example, if I cannot come up with an opinion on my own and I'm always relying on somebody else to do that, or if I have to be completely alone to feel completely safe, right? That would just be something to observe and recognize. Again, not shaming or judging it, but like, is the only safe person in the world yourself? Like, yes, you should be safe with yourself. And if you don't feel that way, then like there's help for that. And at the same time, what could it be like to begin broadening that circle so that you are not your only safe person, which sends our bodies into a state of stress. So these are
I'm
some
just
things
gonna
that I
let
would.
that sit. That's so good. I love doing
So
this with you. That
this
was
is so
really good.
fun. Thank you. Thank you. Is there anything that you would like to validate, Ashley?
Yeah, I think I it's similar to what we've been saying, right? Like it can be hard to engage with your feelings when it doesn't feel safe or you don't make time. So for this song, like, yeah, really busy season of life. Like, could you take an hour and just be like, how am I doing? Um, and then I would also say like it's vulnerable to be authentic, especially when you have to get a job done. So that
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability feels like a really big risk sometimes. And it can
Mm-hmm.
be hard to move through that feeling of risk. So that's understandable too, right? Like I work with people who have social anxiety. Sometimes like the smallest amount of vulnerability can feel like a mistake. And so
Mm-hmm.
it
Yeah.
can feel really intense to do those things. So baby steps.
Yes. I think you made a really great point where you said that, even like a small step of vulnerability can feel like a mistake. And I think that I just want to take this moment to say that part of our process of healing requires doing things that will feel unnatural and wrong.
Yeah, that's really good. Ooh,
Because
this
what
is like a note-taking episode, my friend. Oh my goodness.
So I like to encourage my clients and myself that when I'm doing something that I know is good for me, but does not feel good or feel right, that that is okay. And that is part of the process. So sometimes when it feels wrong, it's actually right. And that
Yeah.
can be an example of like inappropriate guilt or holding boundaries or assertive communication, really common areas in which we start taking steps forward and immediately feel like we've done something wrong. So being
Mhm.
able to distinguish a thought from a feeling, what's true from what you feel, like feelings inform, they don't decide. So yeah, good stuff.
Katie, I have no words. So
You've
good.
had so many good words though.
It's so good. Oh, yeah. I This is definitely a good conversation to have because it's so relatable, right? And that's why I love this song and I'm so glad that we're talking about it. There are
Mhm.
so many times in all of our lives that we feel this at some point. And
Oh yeah.
so it can be hard to figure out where those lines are. So I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
There are some things, however, that I think could be challenged. So I think I would say it's okay to acknowledge that you're having a hard time and make changes to give yourself rest. Like there is there's this time for like the masking. Like you said, there's this time for allowing yourself to rest. And like if you're not finding a good balance, that's where like if the balance feels off, that's where a change needs to be made. So I
Hmm.
think we've said that, but I wanted to summarize like this, if I were to say it in one sentence, like find the balance and make sure that all of those parts are present. Did you have
Yes.
anything that you
Yes.
also wanted to challenge?
Yes. I think I would just ask, are you tired of being a real tough kid?
Yeah.
I think that masking, powering through, pushing through has become a badge of honor. It's a badge of success. It's something that we like, how many energy drinks have you had today? Or how late did you stay up? And how much were you able to get done? And how many hours you worked? And these suddenly become evidence of our value and our worth. It's tied to our productivity. And uh, at some point, when can we begin to ask ourselves, like, am I tired?
Hmm.
Am I tired of this? Maybe I don't want to be a tough kid anymore. Maybe I don't want to be the kid that can handle her shit anymore. Maybe I just want to be the kid that rests when she's tired. Maybe I want to be the kid that um, lives within my limits and my boundaries rather than pushing through. Because at some point, I think, there are seasons of life, maybe let's say as a parent, in which like you just you have to some degree keep showing up for the people who are dependent on you. And at the same time, if that's maybe not the case, if there's other areas in your life in which you're not dealing with dependence, to ask yourself, give yourself the permission to say, do I want to keep living this way? Because at this point, it is a choice in some ways. Not
Yeah.
not in every way, but in some ways.
Yeah. Like, what boundaries do I need to put up with the pressure that I'm feeling? And how much
Yeah.
of this is coming from me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. Ashley, if there's anything more you have to say on that, please add that. Otherwise, take us to our next question, which is what would you encourage?
Yeah, yeah, I think we can move there. I think we've said a lot of this already, but you're showing a lot of resilience. You've proven yourself. Like, I want to really make that statement. Like, you've done it. You've shown
Mm-hmm.
it. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to keep showing it because you've already accomplished showing us that you can do it. We know
Yeah.
you can, and it's okay to
Mm-hmm.
breathe now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, it's okay now. It's safe now. Like, isn't that like the language of just like gentleness? Like, it's safe now. You can come out. It's okay.
Yeah, right. Which goes back to like the cage, right? Like, of who's afraid of little old me. Like, you don't have to be caged anymore, right? Like,
Yeah.
if this idea was a cage, let's open it up. Like, let's make you feel more free. And I think she references that in her album.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree.
What would you say to encourage?
Self-care and embodiment. So, like we talked about, our culture celebrating, overpowering, pushing through. Embodiment is essentially the radical act of living in your body in a way that is full of feeling. And if that sounds like mumbo jumbo, I don't even know what that means. Stick around on this podcast because we will come back to this topic.
I love it.
Um, it's wholehearted living. It's feeling things as they happen. It's not being numb. It's not being shut down. It's not always being in a state of hypervigilance, which is, watching your environment at all times. It's a state of I'm responding to my body cues with gentleness, with curiosity, with attunement. So when I need to use the bathroom, I do that. When I'm thirsty, I drink. When I'm hungry, I eat. When I'm tired, I sleep. It's responding to these cues without seeing them as problematic, moral failure, or an imposition, but
Hmm.
rather an invitation to live as a body, a body that has needs.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good. And I think you said this really well too, that like our society really celebrates not acknowledging your needs, and that can only go so long.
Yes, it can only go so long. And you're right. It can go on, but not for long.
Yeah, yeah. Like, I know, so obviously this podcast is not counseling Taylor herself, right? But I know that she
Correct.
takes like a full day to just like catch up on sleep after these tours. And like there are things that she does too that are
Hmm.
like trying to take care of herself and remind herself that she's a full human too, because these
Hmm.
concerts are like 3.5 hours. And so my encouragement to our listeners would be if Taylor Swift can do it, so can you.
Yes. She can practice self-care. You and I can practice self-care.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, thanks everybody for listening. We're happy that you're here and diving into this with us. Next, we're going to do I Can Fix Him. No, really, I can. And if you want to stay connected, follow us on Instagram at Therate Podcast. And thank you so much, Jeremy, for editing this podcast. Have a great day.